Because as Americans, a lot of times we have the mindset that our duty as a citizen ends at the ballot box, especially if our candidate wins. We think if I check the box and my candidate wins, cool, I did my part, we're good to go. Your duty does not end there. You still have a responsibility to make sure that you do everything you can to hold that candidate accountable for the things that they promise to do. And so whoever you support, whoever that may be, if they win, you need to make sure that you are just as loud, just as passionate as you are right now in making sure that they follow through with the things that they have promised. Especially in this case, when it comes to affordable housing, they may not need to do these specific steps, but they need to do something, right? This is something that I said like earlier, it is not going to wait. It's going to be here to stay, and we need to make sure that other things. Welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In this week's episode, we will be discussing the relationship between politics and housing. Specifically, the role that politicians can play in helping anytime there is issues with housing. Right now, one of the hot button issues that we see going around a lot is the topic of affordable housing. If you remember in the very first podcast episode I did several months ago, that was the topic that I wanted to address. That's the most important thing that's going on right now is just the entire housing affordability issue that we are dealing with across this nation. How can we help it? How can we fix it? How can we help make things better for the American people? That is one of the biggest questions that every politician is getting, not just on the presidential stage, every state, every level. That's one hot button issue that many people are related to because, again, it's all related back to where we live, right? We all want a place, a roof over our heads that we can call home, a place that we can live and call our own. And so this is a topic that isn't going away. It's not a problem that we can just sweep underneath the rug. It is something that anybody who steps into any type of political office is going to need to find ways to address. And so I wanted to take some time to just kind of, a lot of the focus is on the presidential election that's coming up in a few weeks with that. But I also wanted to take time to kind of go into a little bit, not a ton or deep dive, but I want to go in a little bit into the different responses that each of the candidates have given into how they would address affordable housing. And then also I want to do a little bit of a breakdown into some other key things that you should be paying attention to during this election cycle. It's something that they tell us, don't talk about this, don't broach into these subjects. It's up there with money and religion and other things that you're supposed to just keep to yourself. So I know this is a touchy subject that I probably shouldn't be going into, but I think it is important for us to have a clear understanding going into things of what we need to focus on, what we need to pay attention to, and how we can tell whether or not the candidates are actually following through with their promises. A lot of politicians have given promises or lofty goals and expectations and things that they've set and haven't been able to follow through in many cases. And so I wanted to take time to kind of go through and figure out, okay, how does this play into the real estate industry and whether or not it's actually helping the average person with their housing needs and things like that too. So I've obviously I'm working in the industry on a regular basis, so I get to see it from that aspect, but I also help out with several nonprofits who are related in the housing industry as well and get to see the needs that are being amplified in today's market and stuff too. And so I just wanted to take some time to address that. And I think it's a really important topic for us to at least talk about and get the discussions going. Because again, like I said, it's not going anywhere. And so first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the policies and the campaign issues that the Harris-Walz ticket is focusing on as far as housing affordability. And then I'm going to shift to the Trump-Vance ticket and talk about some of the things that they have talked about, what they would do to help with the affordable housing issue and kind of speak to certain points and things that I think we may want to keep in mind, some advantages, some pros, some cons. We'll kind of go into different things. And so first one with the Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, we're going to talk about some of their points that they have mentioned or referenced, whether in the debates or different interviews, about how they would tackle the issue of housing affordability. So one of the big things that they've done, there's two main things that I've been heard a lot in the news recently, but one of which is that they plan to build, make sure I got it right here, 3 million more rental units and more homes that are affordable, right? So like one of the bigger issues that we're dealing with right now is the issue of inventory, right? Anytime you have a supply and a demand issue, there's always going to lead to crazy spikes in the market, but we are dealing with a housing inventory shortage, especially with building new inventory into the market that can help release some of that pressure that is currently on the market, right? There's a lot of homes and a lot of sellers who are kind of sitting on homes and would like somewhere else to go, but maybe they don't want to get rid of that interest rate, or maybe they can't find something else that is what they would want in a different area. And so we're dealing with a lot of shortage issues of new inventory to kind of help relieve some of that pressure. And so this would be huge if that is a big if, they can follow through on that ability to be able to build it. Because again, it's not like there's a lot of builders out there who are like, I could build affordable houses, but I don't want to, so I'm not going to do it. There are builders out there who absolutely want to build affordable houses, and they know they could sell them like that. But they also know that the price of land is more expensive, and the price of the materials and everything it would take to buy these units, to buy these rental and housing, those are so much more expensive now that they just can't afford to build affordable units in the areas where we desperately need them. You know, you'll be driving down the street and you'll look over and you'll see like all these new communities coming up, and you'll be like, oh, there's a new house being built. And it's one of the two sides of things, right? Either it's a townhouse or a really small unit or multi-family unit or whatever, or it's a big mansion or something like that that's millions of dollars. Like those are often the two best uses of the land. They don't really have the options to build as many of the single family, traditional standalone houses that you would typically see. And so that is one issue that a lot of builders are struggling with, is being able to find land cheap enough, and as well as being able to build a house with all the supplies and the way that inflation has shot up with all the prices of the materials. It's just not feasible to build it in some of the best places. And so maybe that means that you have to work a little bit harder to pump money into public transportation to kind of make sure that places or houses that are built on the outskirts of towns have the ability to get into town or into the other areas a lot faster than they normally would have based on traffic. Those are just some different options to keep in mind, but that would be one of the bigger things. If they could follow through with that, that would go a long way in helping to relieve some of that pressure in the housing shortage. The other thing they talked about, and this has been a really hot button issue, is that they talked about doing a first-time home buyer program that would offer $25,000 to first-time home buyers. And I believe it was first-generation home buyers, but that technicality I haven't really parsed through yet. But let's talk about that. Just $25,000 towards a down payment. Obviously, that would be a huge deal to many people if you could get $25,000. But the two biggest questions that remain are, one, where's that money coming from, right? Like I said, is it going to be coming from another tax hike? Or if it is a tax hike, who is getting the short end of the stick on that? Who's being taxed for these funds to come in? And then the second question that I have that hasn't been asked a ton is that, okay, yes, that's great that you have help with the down payment, but then what do we do to address the fact that the houses themselves are still extremely unaffordable, right? So like you said, you could have it where you have the down payment completely covered, but then you still have closing costs, and you still have to worry about whatever that monthly payment may be, right? And so as great as a down payment may be, if the house is still unaffordable for a monthly payment, that does me no good to have $25,000 for a down payment. And so these are just things that we have to kind of keep in mind when we're trying to figure out like whether or not that's going to be the best use of those funds, right? So if that wasn't an option, I would love to see those funds go towards something that could help bring, right? So like if those funds could be used to help bring down regulations to make it easier or more affordable for builders to build new inventory, that would be something else as well. But just a straight up $25,000 down payment, yes, it does help, but for the majority of people who are struggling to find something, that is not going to be a big deal for them, right? If you qualified to buy a $250,000 home and then 2021 and 22 happened, and now you only qualified to buy a $125,000 home, a $25,000 down payment assistance does nothing to help you, right? Because you still can't afford the monthly payments on a regular basis. And so those are just things to kind of keep in mind with that, is that there's always some things. Now, there's some other options that they had on there too that were a little more vague. They weren't as specific as those first two, one of which is cutting red tape to build faster, penalizing firms that hoard homes, and then passing legislation to outlaw forms of price fixing by corporate landlords. Right. And again, like I said, these are the more vague ones where it's kind of like I don't know what the specific policies that they will put in place. And so I can't really speak to whether or not this is something that I absolutely want to happen. Right. So cutting red tape to build faster, that sounds great. But again, what red tape are we cutting? Right. Are we cutting things that would lead to cheaper things or houses being built, or corners being cut so that now people can afford a house, but it's not a safe house, right? It's a house that broke all kinds of normal regulations and stuff like that. Sometimes red tape can be a good thing, right? Sometimes red tape can help make sure that accidents don't happen. And a lot of times that's the reason red tape was even implemented in the first place. And so I'd want to know a little bit more about what they mean by cutting the red tape to build faster. Also penalizing firms that hoard homes. I talked a little bit about this when I've referenced neighborhoods that try to implement rental restrictions, right? It's one of those things that it sounds great, right? Because the homeowners are like, hey, we have more people who are invested in the neighborhood. We want to make sure that everyone here owns and swell. Whether or not that's the right thing to do or not, that's to be debated. That's another discussion for another day. But one thing we do know is that if you put those restrictions in place, it reduces the total pool of buyers for the homes that are out there, right? So when the market's hot and it's doing really well for sellers, great. We can boot out those other people who are trying to rent. We can boot out those other people who are trying to buy the home just so they can rent it out. We can do all that and we'll be just fine. We'll still sell our house easily. But when the market starts to shift to more in the favor of a buyer, and your house has been sitting on the market for 100 days with no offers, you're going to start to look at that a little bit differently. You're like, hey, let me see what these investors are talking about, right? And so that's the same logic that is at play here. If you're saying like, hey, we're going to outlaw all these big firms and companies from buying houses, you do have to keep in mind that when the market shifts and it's more in favor of buyers, there's going to be a lot of people out there who would love to sell their house to anybody. An investor or a first-time home buyer, they don't care. They just want to get that house sold. And if you eliminate the firm's abilities to buy homes, that also makes things or can make things more difficult for homeowners who are trying to sell in a buyer's market. And so that's one thing that you do have. That's an unintended consequence that could come up. And so I don't say that you should just throw caution to the wind and let any investor come in and just buy up a bunch of properties. But we do need to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be times where an investor coming in and making an offer on a homeowner's home, that's going to be the best option for them to be able to take advantage of the biggest advantage to owning a home, the equity, right? And so those are just some things to keep in that. Now, if you shift to the Trump-Vance ticket, former President Trump and J.D. Vance as well, they have a few things as well that they had talked about. So I'm going to kind of go through those a little bit as well. They reference cutting back on inflation. That would be one of the biggest things that would have the greatest impact, immediate impact on housing, is being able to cut back on that inflation, right? Like I said, the more money that people have in their pockets, the more that they have to save and spend towards that home. And also, like I said, if you can reduce their monthly expenses, that means also that they have more to put towards housing as well. And so they're not, if they do buy a house, they're not house poor, and they're not also having to worry about that situation where it's like, hey, great, I got some down payment assistance, but now I still can't afford any of these houses out here. And so cutting back on inflation will be huge, and we're going to come back to that I word again. If they can make that happen, that would be major, right? Like I said, being able to cut down on that inflation, because there's a lot of other things that go into buying a home, right? When you've got student loan payments, you've got groceries, you got gas, you got all these other things that have a major impact on your monthly expenses, that is going to affect what is happening with your home and with your ability to be able to purchase and your ability to be able to save up to be able to get into a home. And so if they can manage to make that happen, if they can manage to get that going, that is going to be one of the bigger advantages that may not seem immediately related, but has a huge impact. Another thing they talked about, in this, I hadn't heard it specifically, but they talked about reducing mortgage rates back down to 3%. My personal preference, I don't see that happening. I don't think that that's going to be. I think the 3% mortgage is a once in a lifetime blip that is not going to be seen again anytime in the near future, at least not in my lifetime. That's just my thought. I could be completely wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am, though. I think that was something that was just a perfect storm of conditions that brought that together, and I don't foresee that happening again, whatever. Now, again, if they can make that happen, by all means, let's make it happen. But I would not bank on that being a possibility in the future. Where a lot of the economists that we've talked to have said, like, hey, we can expect to see the 6% mortgage being the new norm, with fives kind of being the lower one that kind of gets people really enticed to get back into the market. So, they also mentioned securing the border and banning mortgages for illegal immigrants. I personally don't think that is one of the major factors that goes into the housing being as unaffordable as it is, just because the mortgage process, there are so many barriers and there's so much red tape and there's so much checking and confirming information. For someone who is an illegal immigrant to be able to purchase a home, you would have to jump through a ton of hoops. And even then, I'm still not sure it will be possible in a lot of cases. I haven't run into that in many cases at all. But again, like I said, that I don't want you to think that isn't still happening out there or still a possibility. So that could play into it. And then also with the rental units as well, people are saying like, hey, illegal immigrants are taking rental units that are available. And so people are not, or that's driving up the cost. Is that happening? I'm sure you could probably make a case for it. I personally don't think that that's one of the bigger reasons and one of the main reasons why. I think it was kind of used as more of a kill two birds with one stone, in the sense that like, hey, we can tackle the border issue that's going on as well as tackling the housing issue. And this is one way to kind of merge the two. But yeah, I don't really think that is going to have as great of an impact as people might expect. And then another thing that they mentioned as well is opening limited portions of federal land for new construction. Now, this goes back to the cutting red tape to build faster point that Harrison Walls had. With both of them, I'm uncertain on either of those fronts because I'm just not sure what all they mean by that. Like I said, I would want to see more details. I would want to hear more about what exactly they plan to do for regulating those options out there, because I don't want them to completely do away with everything, because there is a purpose and a reason why a lot of these things are put into place. As far as federal laws and regulations and things go, that has impacted my life personally greatly. It's a double-edged sword, right? There was a time in this country where federal laws kept people who looked like myself from owning homes. And there's also now in present day, there's laws and things that have been put in place federally, which make sure that people like myself can own homes. Right. And so, again, like I said, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to government regulations and government laws and rules and things that they have going on. A lot of the implementation or the rules and things they have in place are helping people who have disabilities, people who are of different classes, maybe different religions, all these different things, protected classes, all of those things. Those are federal laws and things that are put in place. And so I would want to make sure that whatever regulations they're cutting back, that they aren't things that would put us in a position where a lot of the people who are disenfranchised the most are the people who wouldn't be able to get in those homes. And the same thing goes with the Harris Walls ticket, where they're talking about the red tape cutting back. I don't want it to be in a situation where we're ending up with inferior products or inferior things because you've cut back regulations that were put in place for a reason, right? And so those are the kind of the main things. Like I said, if they can cut back the Trump Vance ticket, if they can cut back on that inflation and help our incomes as well, whether that be through tax breaks as well for the middle class families and stuff too, those are going to be the biggest things on their ticket. And as far as the Harris Walls tickets goes, if they can find a way to make it easier for builders to make affordable inventory, right? And they can help relieve some of that pressure. That's the biggest thing on their end that would help in these cases. But regardless of who you choose or who you support, who you want to work with, one thing that we all need to keep in mind is that I know if your candidate loses, right, the candidate that you support, if they lose, I already know we're going to hear your thoughts and opinions for the next 4 years. I'm not worried about hearing those thoughts and opinions. Whatever candidate loses, we're going to hear plenty from the people who support them. What I am more concerned about is the people who support the winning candidate. Because as Americans, a lot of times we have the mindset that our duty as a citizen ends at the ballot box, especially if our candidate wins. We think if I check the box and my candidate wins, cool, I did my part, we're good to go. Your duty does not end there. You still have a responsibility to make sure that you do everything you can to hold that candidate accountable for the things that they promise to do. And so whoever you support, whoever that may be, if they win, you need to make sure that you are just as loud, just as passionate as you are right now in making sure that they follow through with the things that they have promised, especially in this case when it comes to affordable housing. They may not need to do these specific steps, but they need to do something, right? This is something that I said like earlier, it is not going to wait. It's going to be here to stay, and we need to make sure. The other thing you all need to keep in mind as well is that, as I've said before, real estate is hyper local, right? It changes drastically based on the state, based on the town, the municipality, wherever you may live. Real estate can be drastically different depending on the area, which is way more important than anything we just talked about with the presidential elections. Your local elections are what you truly, truly need to pay attention to. You need to look at the local people who are impacting the things that are going on in your state, whether that's the governor, the mayor, your city council members, your state legislative people as well, and representatives. You need to make sure that you are researching them as well, because they are the ones that are going to be determining whether or not all these rules and regulations are in place, the things that can help with inventory, the things that can help with down payments and all these different things that can help with inflation. A lot of those are going to be on a more local level. And so you want to make sure that you are researching these people. Do not show up to the ballot box and just check names willy-nilly and just skip the rest. The rest, those ones that you just glaze over after you get past president, those are the ones that are going to have the more immediate impact on your day-to-day life. And so you want to make sure that you take the appropriate time to really study them, learn what they stand for, and how that impacts your life and how that can impact whatever is going on with your house, right? Whether that's the superintendent, right? They factor into the schools, right? That's going to help determine where you want to live, the value of your home. A lot of that is going to be dictated by the quality of the schools. If you look at the commissioner for insurance, right? That's going to factor into the costs that go into buying your home. If you look at the city council members and the regulations for zoning and things that they have power over as well, again, you need to make sure that you have a firm understanding of what these people stand for. And once you vote for them, if they win, you have the responsibility to make sure that they follow through on those things that they promised. So hope that that's helpful for you all. Take some time to really study and learn everything on your sample ballot before you step into that ballot box. But I hope that you all have a wonderful day and continue to learn and stay educated on this stuff, because it does make an impact on our lives. Have a good one. I'll talk to you next week.